All right, as I promised, the second part of our program today, as you're listening to KOCI and the Money Matters program, is KOCI itself. I've been here about 4 years, and it's just really fun to watch this community radio station grow and be a part of the community. So, and as I mentioned at the top of the program, it's very interesting. When we're out at events, we get all kinds of people from all walks of life coming up to our booth or however we're approaching these events. And they just tell us how much they love the music, how much they love the programming, and a lot of them don't know that we're a nonprofit. They don't know that we're a community-based radio station. And it is such an incredible, valuable resource in any community, in my opinion, that I thought we just would tell you a little bit more about that. So with no further ado, I actually have in studio with me Brent Kahlen and Brian Helvey, who are both directors of KOCI Radio. And I want to talk to them about their experience with the radio station and what's going on. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Troy.
How are you doing this morning, Troy?
I'm doing great. It seems a little awkward having the guys here that I'm kind of technically working for, interviewing you guys, but it's really neat to change because I think it's so important for us to talk about what is KOCI Radio and let our listeners know what we're doing here. Brent, let's start with you. Tell me a little bit about your radio background.
Well, I was just going to add, too, that 4 years has gone by so fast.
Yeah, it has.
And, I know we're going to get into a lot of things of where KOCI is going. But my radio background was I started out at a very young age. At least I figured that way from what I've seen others have done also. I just had this interest in radio. Listened to it for many years when I was a kid. My parents would tell me when I was a kid, turn off that radio and go to sleep, and so I would I went to a earplug and under the covers to listen to radio. So as I got to the point where I was able to get into the radio business, I had worked at Orange County stations, some Riverside stations, and then also LA radio, last of which was K-Rock and KNAC in Long Beach. And then the radio business started to change somewhat. And I had the chance to go to other stations across the country, but also decided I wanted to stay here. I had a business going at the time, and I couldn't easily pick up and leave. So always had that radio bug still in the background, wanted to get back to it sometime along the way, but went on with my business that I was doing since then, and had been looking over the last probably 20 years to buy a radio station somewhere across the United States in a town that I liked, population of about 25 to 50,000 people. And this is during the time when radio was consolidating, and the big guys, the big 3 or 4 or 5 corporations were buying up all the radio stations all across the country and all the markets. And so the price of the stations what they were being sold at didn't match with the books. And so then it came along the possibility of this type of radio right here in this area. I remember I was talking about a station that would cover a town in rural areas about 25 to 50,000. Here we have the signal we do that covers 250,000 or more.
Yeah, you picked a good spot, and you didn't have to move.
Didn't have to move, and everything fit, and so here we are.
And I was here.
Yeah, and Brian, you were as well. And Brian, you don't have so much of a radio background, but you've got a great governmental background and community background. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it was a perfect partnership. As you mentioned, it's ironic that I do not have radio background, unlike my esteemed partner, but I've always had a love of music. I used to play radio, music shows at my colleges that I went to. I would, throw on concerts and stuff, and I was able, when I was in college, to become a inside player and very close friends with the owners of the Golden Bear nightclub. And as you all know, Brent and Troy both, we were active in some recent Golden Bear reunion projects down here. But my background has basically been in planning and research. I've worked in Washington, D.C. for a good part of the period that Brent was getting into radio. I worked for the headquarters at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in my mid-20s and later with the National League of Cities. And so I came to KOCI and Star Tree Foundation with a background in community, civic, and governmental issues at the highest level. But I also worked for the County of Orange for over 8 years, so that really equipped me, I think, to understand some of the issues here. So for me, it was a blend of a love of music, an understanding of the music industry, and my civic and community background. And Brent and I have married that up pretty well. Still working on it, aren't we, Brent?
Still working on it, and sometimes it doesn't seem like we've gone very far yet. When we look back and all the records we've kept, we actually have made headway, even though we started in a very slow economy, slower than I've ever seen, and been able to hold on while other businesses have gone under.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I'm not sure that I've told my story on air before. I certainly have to you guys several times, but I too enjoyed radio when I was a little kid, and that was a little town back in Michigan where we just had one little AM station that we could pick up, and that was pretty much it. But it was always, and I just remember their catchphrase, "Wake the town and tell the people." That was their little catchphrase for the little news thing that came on. But what made me bring that up is I was just driving around here in Orange County, Newport Beach one day, and I just happened upon 101.5. And I started hearing some music that I hadn't heard before. Well, I'd heard it before, but not since I had an album out. It was a B-side of an album when I was in high school with my headphones on. Same thing you were doing, Brent, under the covers, listening to my music in high school. I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And then one of the sponsors came on, and it was for a local business down the street. And it was, right next to Ralph's. It was just so homey. It was that old town, old school kind of a sound. I thought, well, that is pretty cool for a place like Orange County.
Yeah, as did a lot of early radio during the years you're talking about.
Yeah, and so it intrigued me. So I actually made the call. So what are you guys doing over there? And I've been here 4 years now.
I have an interesting story that kind of goes to the heart of what Brent and I have been trying to do. I think on the second day that we were on the air, I had a friend call me up and say he literally pulled his car over to the side of the road and stopped because he heard 2 or 3 songs in a row that he hadn't heard in years. And that led to a conversation, as Brent is well aware of the relationship between some of the great FM radio stations on the music side in the past. For example, a KPPC, the very famous Mighty Met KMET. And what a lot of people quickly realized is right here in Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, we had sort of a synthesis going on of the best of those great radio stations. Of course, K-Rock has to be included in that too, and Brent, of course, has, as he'll tell you, a great relationship and background working with K-Rock. So we just took people by surprise with our playlist. But then, Troy, as you noticed, Newport Beach and Costa Mesa businesses and civic groups started popping up on the air. And that was really something that was based on Brent and I's thorough research before we went on the air for several years on what this community was trying to accomplish, its key groups and its civic leaders. And it was a real experiment that seems to have really blossomed.
And that's one of those things, as I was mentioning, I hear often when I talk to the people in the community, is that it's just music they haven't heard in a long time, and along with our programming. And that's what I thought. I mean, when I moved to Orange County, it was like, man, there's just no good radio station. So this is in my car full time, and so I listen to. Brent, I wanted to ask you a question. We call it a community radio station or a nonprofit. Can you identify for me the difference between like community radio, public radio, and commercial radio?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I can do it in a nutshell. Commercial radio used to be, remember you were talking about how it used to be more like homegrown type radio way back. Well, commercial radio, the commercial radio stations on now, and people say, why do commercial radio stations play the same stuff, and why are there only a few different types of programs or music across the dial and talk shows and things of that nature? And that's because commercial radio stations are now owned by companies who are on the stock exchange. And so one of the big differences is they now have to perform for their investors. They always had to perform and make a profit, but now they really have to perform. And in this downturn in the economy, they had some problems, and because of the largeness of what they had built their radio empires into. And then along the way, they had asked the SEC, well, please don't make it so we have to do news anymore, and so that we have to do public service and things of that nature. Now, I'm not saying that they don't do it. They just didn't want to have to be held into the amount of time they used to have to put into it. So that's all changed. And then, obviously way back, nonprofit public radio came along, and that was to give more entry into localness of what was going on here, which included, Los Angeles and Orange County. And as those nonprofit stations grew in size, they were able to raise their power. This was in a time when there weren't too many stations on the dial taking up all of the frequencies that were left. So then they got to a point where they were doing what they were. This is now public radio I'm talking about, which is nonprofit public radio, which we aren't. We are a new form of licensing, which is community radio, and what that does is it brings it right home here to the local very local part of this community, which is basically Newport Beach and Costa Mesa, and we also happen to be able to reach Orange and Anaheim Hills and Huntington Beach and Irvine and Santa Ana and so forth. So that's what this is, and it goes back to what Brian said, and I'll sum this up quickly. We get many calls and emails. I remember the day a woman called. She says, "You made me late for an appointment." I say, "Excuse me?" She told me the request line. I say, "Excuse me?" And she laughed. She says, "No, this is I just found your radio station, and I heard one song play." She says, "I pulled in the parking lot to go to my appointment, and I couldn't leave the car because I hadn't heard this song in a long time. And then the next song came on. I had to listen to that, and then the next song," she said, "then instead of just going to the news," she says, "Okay, this is when I get out of here." But then you went into local news. You were talking about something that was happening right here on the street that I was on.
Well, and that's what community radio brings to it. It's a variety of content that you don't necessarily get in commercial radio. It's local. It's poignant. It's relative. And when we say community, and I know, Brian, you're big on community. You always have been in civic affairs. What does community mean to you?
Well, it's interesting. I'll try to answer that question sort of in a roundabout way. Brent and I both, in preparing to submit our proposal to the FCC, we discovered that in the FCC actual guidance and the many documents that were associated with that was the clear concept that a community-based radio station like KOCI, a low-power FM, is to serve as a distinct and locally based alternative radio medium for community groups and organizations that otherwise would not have the opportunity to get on the air. And when we saw that, and we knew that music was also going to be key in attracting listeners, we thought that we'd died and gone to heaven. And the fact that we had the possibility of doing it in one of the nation, if not the world's most dynamic media markets, was just an opportunity we couldn't slip by. So community means to me giving a voice and giving promotional and programming support, like on your show here with the variety of guests and the Green Orange and other community shows that we've been working on, a chance for people to really use radio for the benefit of their community, their members, their activities, and the events. And so to me, this is all about being local and harnessing the power of the FM band to do something constructive for our community groups and residents.
And it's also an availability. I mean, we offer an availability to the community, what you certainly cannot find in a commercial setup like that. And so, we have open arms here at KOCI. We talk about it all the time on the air, where it's like, you've got an idea for programming, you've got an idea for, sponsorships, whatever it might be, let us know. And you've got great access here.
And Troy, a great example of that, this is only one of many. Remember the situation with the fairgrounds controversy a while back? Mm-hmm. And you had how many people in here, how many different times? And it started out with 5 different people with 5 different views on what should be done with the fairgrounds, and all in this same room for several shows. And what finally happened towards the end, they all kind of melded together by talking over the air and taking phone calls and getting feedback. It all kind of worked itself out. And I mean, that's just one example of many.
Yeah. I just wanted to point out, too, Troy, that one of the reasons, in my opinion, and Brent and I have talked about this at length, one of the reasons I think that KOCI, or our nonprofit parent, Startree, was successful in getting FCC approval is because we did our homework. We realized that in Newport Beach and Costa Mesa and in the outlying areas here in central and coastal Orange County, we had just this dynamic set of communities, boating, surfing, a lot of nonprofits, a tremendous amount of emphasis on youth sports and youth activities. As you know, we have the Environmental Nature Center right across the street, the Back Bay Conservancy. We have an active Lions Club who just did the fish fry, and the list went on and on. The Newport Beach Film Festival, Troy, which you and I and Brent have been working on for the last several years. And so by incorporating these points in the community that we could promote and support and utilize, for the benefit of all of the listening audience, that turned the head of the FCC. It really, really did, because not only did we demonstrate that we understood our market, but we appreciated the fact that you build relationships with these groups, and that came out in our proposal, and we were rewarded for it.
Yeah, and Brian mentioned the FCC and licensing, Brent. That took a little time, right? I mean, that's not an overnight process.
It did. We first found out about this possible new community radio thing in, I think it was about 1997, and then we're ready by the year 2000 to file for it. And then it was hurry up and wait
Yeah.
for 7 years, I think.
What a wait it was.
Yeah.
What's happened to that radio station you guys were going to start? Where is it?
Yeah. And then, we talked a little bit about the programming and the music. Music is certainly a part of that. People, I don't know anybody who really doesn't love music at some point. How do you decide what music is played on KOCI and who does the programming?
Well, as you obviously know, you've been part of that decision. We've asked everybody here at the station to give us their input as to what they thought should be on the air, and that's basically where we started. And then Brian and I, got down to the point where we listened to everything and figured, okay, well, this should be on our regular playlist. This should be maybe for when we get a call for a request. Because some songs, I think, should be played more than others. And the other part was, as we were talking about, we wanted to play the familiar and the unfamiliar. And then we thought, well, what's unfamiliar to one person is not necessarily to another person. Yeah. And we're finding out apparently a whole lot of it is, not only is it unfamiliar, we were a little concerned about that, but not only is there a lot of unfamiliar music to a lot of people, but they like it. It's music that I guess you would say sounds familiar because of the way it sounds, but they've never heard it. And
right.
So they said, why hasn't this ever been played? Why haven't I never heard this before? And that's still going on to this day.
And you were telling me, I think commercial radio stations have, like 400 songs or 200 songs or something like that?
A lot of the stations that do a lot of the repetition, like we were talking about the commercial stations, they do these tests. They spend $1 to $2 million testing the music out with an audience, in a live audience in a room. And they have them vote. Do you like this song? Don't you? And that's how they come up with that.
Yeah, and that's something you don't really find in community radio, at least not that I have experienced, is that top 40 thing, with the big commercial radio. It's just not what it is.
And if we went through that, we'd probably end up with 400 or 500 or 600 songs too.
Yeah, but
because not everybody agrees on what's the best music. Brian's got something.
I was going to say, I can tell you your playlist right now is 2,237 songs right now.
And we're a long ways from where we would like to be.
And we're going to put a bunch of, so that you can tell just right there, there's a great reason to hang out with us. Yeah. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, well, I want to elaborate on what Brent was saying. There was a real method to our madness. Brent and I and our other associates in the early days before we went on the air realized that in Brent's case, years in radio, in my case, a real strong knowledge of the music. We had to figure out, what our playlist boundaries were going to be, and we realized that from the mid-'60s to the mid-'80s was a renaissance that is going to live forever. And so what Brent and I and others did is we actually did our homework, and we started with groups, whether it be Cream, the Beatles, Tom Petty, or Buffalo Springfield, and all the way down the line, and we identified deep cuts, alternative cuts, and Brent was very helpful here because he knew what commercial radio typically played. He knew the commercial break patterns, and so when we took songs that people hadn't heard, basically we were picking stuff that we remembered from our many years of listening to music. People loved, B-sides, deep cuts, long cuts, album cuts, and the response to that was just overwhelming. We did our homework on these bands, and everybody just couldn't believe that we were willing to play the stuff that wasn't necessarily the top hits, but we play the top hits also. It's really remarkable.
And there's many kinds of music, and I appreciate almost all of them, but it's almost seemed a common thread I'm hearing you both say. It's back when music was played with instruments. I mean, guitars and drums and, keyboards. Yeah. It's that kind of music in that thing. There's a couple other things I want to talk about that are very important to community radio and KOCI. First of all is the fact that we're a nonprofit. We're a nonprofit entity, and that means an awful lot, and we do an awful lot of work with other nonprofits throughout Orange County. Brent, kind of tie that together a little bit. What is our relationship with other nonprofits, and how can we assist and help with that?
Well, that's a perfect question. I'd like to tie that together with we were talking about the music because we looked at we have to do some kind of programming to draw on the audience. A radio station has to have an audience, and even if you're a nonprofit, it still has to be run like a business. So we had to have enough of a listening audience to be able to get the support we needed by listener donations, for one, also by business sponsors. There are also business grants. In other words, business sponsors would be local businesses here in the community that, donate the money to KOCI, and then we put them on the air and give and highlight their business. And, our listeners have often told us that they know that if they support our sponsors, they support KOCI. and we've heard that over and over again by phone calls and by emails. And then, of course, there's the fundraising that we do. I mean, we have the business grants from the larger corporations that want to donate money to a good cause, and then we have, like I said, the fundraising activities that we do to where we can have 400, 500, 600 people or more at a place at one time, and we put on entertainment. We have a silent auction and things of that nature to raise money for KOCI.
And I tell you, it is very, very rewarding from my standpoint to have these other nonprofits. And Brian, you could probably name off 20 off the top of your head right off the bat, local nonprofits throughout Orange County that they contact us, or they're having an event. We'll contact them and say, what you do? What are you doing? How can we assist? And we'll put out some 30-second spots or something promoting their event. And almost to a person, they are telling us that because of what we are doing in the community, it has helped their venture, whether it be the Red Cross or Susan G. Komen, whatever it might be.
Or even the smaller nonprofits.
And small ones, yeah.
Right. Well, on that point, it goes back to how we began. In building relationships, you have to first have some kind of credibility. And when you have an FM radio signal, whether it be community-based or covering the world, people have a tendency to pay attention. But what I've found out over the years here and working on this is that if you understand and appreciate and have a sincere desire to help these community groups and nonprofits, they're going to want to work with you. And because we are locally oriented and we have this strong listener base with the music, you're absolutely right, Troy. These people, whether it be the Newport Aquatic Center or the Costa Mesa Chamber of Commerce, whether it be the Costa Mesa Community Foundation, Costa Mesa United, or the Lions Club, they know that there's this symbiotic relationship between listening to the music and our community service promotions and interviews like on your show, and they started melding together. And the recent Fish Fry, Troy, is a perfect example. When we put together all those bands that were the core of the entertainment program, that was a result of 3 or 4 years of relationships with those musicians who loved the chance to play for us in a civic setting. And it was remarkable to see these top groups come to the Fish Fry on something that had to do with the Lions Club community projects. And whether it be the Chamber of Commerce or the City of Costa Mesa, whenever we've gotten behind an event that we either represent ourselves in the field or do programming here in the studio, we have an effect on turnout and really help provide the visibility that these groups are looking for. It's really rewarding.
Yeah, and it is rewarding, and I'll mention we're all volunteers here. It's not like, it's nonprofit. Of course, nonprofit people can make money. I mean, it's not impossible, but the point is we're here volunteering and providing the service, and to have a demographic that is called Orange County and provide this kind of local community service is it's extremely rewarding, and it's beneficial to all.
Just take example today. I mean, how many places in the radio world can you in the morning be hearing something, for example, by the Doors or the Beatles, and within a matter of a half an hour be hearing about an estuary awareness event that's happening right here at the Back Bay, and then within a matter of minutes be talking to a notable county supervisor about the issues facing Orange County, and then in a couple hours we'll be going into Brent's audio vault and be playing all sorts of these wild, wonderful songs. People have really been sort of bedazzled by the fact that we have this synthesis of good community service with visible, quality guests on timely topics, and people still can get their Led Zeppelin hit. It's really something unique.
And Brent, how do you take all of that and keep the lights on? I mean, how do people support community radio?
That's a good question. It takes a lot of hours, which I know that all of us in this room are aware of, because Brian and I have put in quite a few hours, and Troy, I know you have also.
We don't sleep
a lot of time. Well, not much, anyhow. But it's a lot of hours, and it's putting these things together, like I talked about, donations from the listeners, and we're now working on the grant writing process that we're going through for the business grants. By the way, these are business grants. There are no more government grants available, as far as we know. If they are, they're well hidden and hard to find, or they've been used up by the public radio stations.
Well hidden and hard to find. Yes.
But that's an interesting point of what you say. Is it is so important to get the donations from our listeners to keep this working and to keep the lights on. And one of there's a study here, and there's been several over the years, but the most recent studies have shown that when a business supports a nonprofit, not only is it good for the nonprofit, it's also good for that business. And the reason is because the employees of that business appreciate the fact that the company they work for supports local nonprofit activities. In fact, there is a nonprofit called Business for Better that Brian and I recently went to. And this is a really interesting thing. They just started up. We just found out about it, and it's brand new. And what they're doing is they're a nonprofit that is connecting nonprofits, other nonprofits, with businesses. And they have some pretty big businesses involved in this, like Microsoft, Avnet, PIMCO, Disneyland, and then other businesses that aren't so well known by their names necessarily, but there are many businesses out there that give corporate grants to nonprofits. They have a cause that they believe in. And what this Better for Business has found out is that by businesses aligning their business strategy and brand with a societal cause, and identifying and partnering with a nonprofit that believes in their values, and that the nonprofit has values that business believes in, and involve their customers in their cause to create programs to create deeper engagement, it does better for the community, it does better for the business, does better for all concerned.
Brian? Yeah, I'd like to add to that, Troy. What Brent and I discovered, as he was saying, is that really the paradigm in local community services is changing. And as your interview with Morlock and other civic leaders on the budget situation in the public sector shows, is that business and government are both realizing that their demands for services are going to be increasing, not decreasing, but this is going to happen in a climate of increased budget constraint, tax debates, problems of funding. And so businesses, as Brent was saying, are now learning that the best way to mobilize their product, brand their product, and keep morale of their employees high is to link them up to community service organizations and civic groups. And a radio station like KOCI is right in the middle of that transformation and how we can facilitate that through good programming, interviewing, and community support. It's a whole new world out there.
So what would you tell individuals how they can help out and how they can be a part of KOCI?
Well, by, as I said earlier, supporting our sponsors, and also we do have a website, KOCIradio.com. It has a donation button on it. You can go click on that anytime. In fact, we're about ready to make a few changes to where if somebody might say, well, I can only donate $10 a month or $25 a month or $50 a month, and they can't do a larger sum all at once, we're going to set it up to where they can go to our donation button, click on there, and they can say, I want to donate X amount of dollars a month for 12 months. And it's that constant flow of donations that help us greatly to expand and do other things we want to do. We've done well considering the economy, but we could do much better than what we are. And we intend to shoot for that.
Yeah. And Troy, also on that, our field presence at these community events, which is pretty extensive, and we get approached all the time by people who want to help or make suggestions about programs or music. And so we would encourage people, like Brent said, to contact us on the website, or to give us a ring here at the station, or to come to the events that we co-promote out in the field, and we'd be happy to talk to people. We get a lot of valuable input all the time, and a lot of folks have helped us in our field work and in our fundraisers.
And we're working on future events too that are coming up.
We have a lot of
stay tuned, as they say, right?
Stay tuned. And I'll take this opportunity to plug the city's 60th anniversary celebration at the end of the month, and we're going to be there as we always are, and hope people come on down and say hi to us and enjoy that great festival.
Brent Kahlen and Brian Helvey, both directors here at KOCI. Thank you both for coming in and telling us a little bit more about KOCI Radio. I appreciate it.
Appreciate the opportunity, Troy.
And of course, I'm not, trying to make this as a big flag waving, come on down and bring your suitcases full of money. But the fact is, it is just such an unbelievable resource we have here, and I wanted to let more people know about what we're doing and how we're doing it. So,
well, as you know, nonprofits do fundraisers on the air.
Yeah.
And that's how they do it.
And while I have the chance here, I'm going to catch you by surprise, Troy. I'd like to publicly, salute you for an exceptional job that you've been doing on Money Matters, and your quality of guests, the timeliness of your topics, your preparation, and the way you've made it interesting, whether it be Obamacare or budget cuts here among local governments. You have just done an exceptional job, and as someone who was behind this proposal, you're an example of what Brent and I had in mind with an outstanding community service program. I want to congratulate you.
I thank you. I appreciate that. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to help out. And we've run out of time, so if you have questions, comments, you've got people you know that might want to help out KOCI. If you've got programming ideas, or if you have a business that you'd like to promote, that is all part of our what we do here locally. So check out our website at kociradio.com. You can get all of our information there. You can call us, contact us. We're happy to hang out with you guys and just enjoy what we've got here in Orange County. With that, I will wrap it up. You're listening to 101.5 KOCI LP-FM, Newport Beach, Costa Mesa. Again, this is Troy Davis with the Money Matters program. Orange County, have a great summer.